Good evening and welcome to tonight's webinar. Thank you very much for being on the call on this cold Thursday night. Well, quite cold in Sydney anyway from today. But before we get into that, I just want to check that okay for the webinar. So if you can hear me, can I please get you to type a 1 in the chat box? And you'll find the chat box just over the right of the screen. So if you can hear me, please just type in a 1 and let me know, or just type in a message and let me know that the sound is fine. Okay, great. Sound is okay. And I'll just confirm that you can all see my screen as well. So you should have a black screen with a picture of me and personal input. So if you can see that, please just type in a 2 in the chat box and let me know. Okay, excellent. Looks like we've got a few too. So I'll assume that everyone can see my screen. If you can't, please go ahead and type me a message in the chat box and we can try and get that sorted for you. So let's get started. Thank you for joining tonight. So as we get started on tonight's webinar, Paradigm Fundamentals, what I'd like to do before we get straight into the content is actually get you to reflect on why it is you joined this particular webinar tonight. Now, we are going to go through some very comprehensive content and content that could be very important to you and, in fact, quite life-changing. And as we head into looking at this content, you to really just stop for a moment and have a think about why it is that you registered for the webinar and why tonight. So you've given up some of your time. We're going to be together for around about 45 minutes, I'd say, depending on questions. So for you to have given up that time tonight, what is it that motivated you to be here? So is it because you believe you're meant to do something big with your life and actually know how to get started? Or maybe it's that you feel stuck in your current job. Is it maybe that you avoid thinking about your financial situation? Are you possibly because you're in debt and a way to get out? And possibly linked to that, stuck in a job you don't enjoy, but you stay because you can't replace your income. Now, this may apply to some of you, but have a think about whether you have spent time and money investing in perhaps other personal development courses or books, but you haven't necessarily achieved the results that you wanted, despite feeling like you have a good comprehensive understanding of the theory. Maybe you haven't quite gotten there yet from a financial standpoint. And finally, have you lost sight of the life that you'd like to live and settled for what you think you can get out of life? Now, if any of this applies to you, I'm confident that you're here today. Because in tonight's we'll teach you all about paradigm fundamentals, and I'm going to explain to you how paradigms impact your results and your information that less than 2% of the population know. And the information that I will share with you can be extremely life-changing once you understand what it means and also how to apply. Now, I want you to know well that this is your journey. If some of the statements that I made above do apply to you, then I do ask that you don't be too hard on yourself about that. Everyone is on a particular journey, and at different times you experience different highs and lows, and unfortunately we do. And if you are stuck, then the most important thing is that you recognize that you're stuck, because once you recognize it, you get the help that you need. And it then becomes quite easy to get unstuck if you understand what got you there in the first place. And so if you are feeling a little down on life or feeling that you should be doing better than tonight or for the time that we're together on this webinar, I ask that you just take a deep breath, just choose and give yourself permission and to just reflect on these materials with an open heart and mind. So I'm Caroline Labor, and before we get started on the specific materials about paradigms, I'll just tell you a little bit about myself and why it is that I'm here tonight talking to you about paradigms. I've actually got a diverse background. So to tell you a little bit about where I've been in my journey, I've actually had quite a strong and successful corporate career. So my background is in finance and I'm a qualified CPA, if you're not familiar with that term. And I've spent the last 9 years of my career in finance in media, Australia's largest media company, which is Foxtel. And so I've had a lot of experience with corporate executives and professionals basically from lots of different backgrounds running projects. Now, on the business side, my corporate career, I also started and ran a catering business, which was called Party Catering Sydney. I actually no longer have it, but that was one of my earlier ventures. And I was also involved in a startup, so starting up a marketing agency, specifically for mobile marketing called Apps. So there are a couple of them involved in. And my other passion, which you may have seen in one of my blog posts, relates to music. And so I'm currently part of 2 different vocal groups. So one is the Delights, which is a retro and pop band, and the other one called Harmony in Worship. And we actually recorded an album together a couple of years ago, which is on iTunes. So they're just a couple of my passion of music. And so, as I mentioned, I do have quite diverse interests, but when I bring all of that together, my major passion is actually helping other people achieve the best that they can out of their lives, because I've found that after learning a lot of the materials around paradigm, understanding what it is and what it takes to achieve the best, a lot of which I learned from mentors like Bob Proctor and Margaret Lynch and Sam Ovens. Basically, I found that there's a path to get results that you want to achieve, and once you understand what it takes, you can get those results in any facet of your life. You know, sometimes it's even in a way accidental, and what I mean by that is that if you're improving in one area and you understand applying, then quite often what happens is you start to reap the benefits of that application to many areas. And so in my case, while I was off recording albums and having startup ventures out, I was actually doing better and better in my corporate career as well, and was able to progress up to quite senior levels. I had benefits of really working on your mindset and, you know, understanding what it is and what it takes to make that shift in your life. And so my passion is actually teaching that to other people, because what I found is it's something that and you can just continue to extend that to many facets of your life. And so what I found is that it is all about precision. And so what I'd like to share with you tonight about having that blueprint for success and how you can apply it over and over again. But the key is actually understanding how it works, understanding how it's working against you, so that you can make the changes that are needed to move forward in your life and go on and achieve amazing results. Now, tonight is all about, because you're the only one who can really bring about a change in your life. So as the saying goes, You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make the horse drink. And so in that sense, I'm going to share with you a lot of the really important principles that will play for you, but I can't actually make you that piece is in your hands. And so really the power to implement this and apply this rests with you. But I'm certainly going to share tonight how you can do that. Now, Vince Roazi, life and your life. And ultimately, that's what we've been just covering, which is that the power of this really rests with you. By uncovering what it takes to shift your mindset and make those changes, ultimately hold that power in your hands. And that's going to allow it in a massive way. Look at what we're going to cover specifically tonight. Now, the first thing that we're going to look at is what causes your results, and come in, show you how paradigms cause your results. Now, a lot of people would say that it's the actions you take that cause your results, and so what we do is we delve a level deeper than that, and I will show you how it's actually paradigms that are controlling your for your. So secondly, we're going to look at how your mind works. And this is really important and very much related to the first point, because and it's the way that they work together and understanding where your paradigm actually sits within those two parts of your mind, results as well. And when you're in a state of conflict or you feel stuck, I'll give you an understanding as to why that occurs. Change your behavior going forward, because you'll have an in-depth understanding of what's really going on beneath the surface. And so once we've covered those 2 points, we'll then touch on what it is that you need to do to achieve long-lasting results. And the key is long-lasting, because sometimes people can achieve amazing results. So you can, by sheer force of will, slog your heart, achieve really excellent results. But often what I find with clients that I've worked with and people that I've observed, and even in myself, is that until you understand the path that you've taken to get there and the mindset that it takes, just be a fluke. Yes, there is cause and effect behind it, but it can just be a one-off event. And so often they find temporary and they find that they're back to square one. And after seeing points 1 and 2 tonight, you'll understand why that happened for Haddon to, in fact, achieve the long-lasting results that you're after. And then finally, I'm going to touch on how I can personally support. And, you know, there are definitely things that you'll be able to take away from this webinar that you'll be able to implement immediately. But for those of you who may be looking for something a little extra, I will touch on the kind of help that I offer as well. Okay, so so what I want you to do is a moment and think about what it is that you really want. So, you know, what is it that you want out of life? Now, I know for many of you, you probably are to some degree a route go to, and you possibly don't take a lot of time to step back and think about what you really. But if you could live the life that you loved, and you could do what you loved every day, and, you know, even earn an income doing what you love, what would that be? And what would that balance of, you know, both work and holidays look like? So just take a moment to have a think about that, because it's obviously something that's quite personal and it'll be different for everybody that truly drives you. And one thing I will suggest to you is too drawn in by, I guess I call it the tropical island syndrome, which happens, and I've been here many times, so it's not a criticism, but often if you're going through a very stressful period at work, all you can think about is, oh, the thing that seems the most appealing to you is that, you know, you probably just want to be relaxing out on a tropical island. But what I'd suggest to you is that that's probably just a temporary desire. While you're 1 week or, even stretched out further, if you need a really good break, often deep down, that's not what you really want. You'd reach a point where you'd probably be bored with that. So try and put yourself in the shoes of, if you did have that tropical island break, what would you want to do after that? What would life really look like? Ultimately, make changes if your level of discomfort with your current situation is strong enough, and also if you've got something that you want to move to. So just take a few moments to have a think about that. I just want you to keep that in mind throughout the webinar, because as we look at these various concepts, we will relate it back to your goal. And, maybe it's something that you really want that you haven't tried, but in some cases it could be something you have currently been striving for, and maybe you just haven't reached it yet, and maybe you're feeling frustrated about not having gotten there sooner. And so can we go through these concepts, and we will tie it all back into your goal. Okay, so let's get stuck into section 1, which is all about what causes your results. The things that I have learned from Bob Proctor is he's very good at asking questions. The reason he is it sort of challenges you to think, especially if it's not something that you'd necessarily ask yourself or say. And one of those questions that Bob often is, why do some people earn so much more than others? So that might seem like a really obvious question on the surface. So you could say something like, well, it's on what job you do. Some people are more qualified, some people are smarter. And that might seem like a good surface level answer. But to you that there is a little bit more to it than that. And so what I want to, the amount of income that people earn, yes, it is related to the kind of job you do and the supply and demand equation. But I want to break that down further, a little more scientifically, and actually call out the income that you earn is driven by something called the law of compensation. So there are many other laws out there. So we're well familiar, for example, with the law of gravity. Throw an apple up in the air and you watch it, it is going to fall back down and hit the ground unless you actually catch it. And so the law of compensation, I guess, is what you are. When I explain it to you, it will hopefully make quite a lot of sense. And so they states that the amount of money that you earn will be in direct proportion to the need for what you do, your ability to do it, and there will be in replacing you. So let's just take a moment to think about that. In terms of the need for what you do, so, that's quite obvious. That really just boils down to basic supply and demand and, whether people are interested in your product or your services or not. Now, in some cases, create that demand, but more often than not, it's usually a demand that already exists in the market. And so basically, if there's not a tremendous need for what you do, then there's not going to be a high price placed on people wanting your product or services and what you have to offer. So it is very important that you consider demand in your market. I mean, in some cases, you can create it. So the second factor, your ability to do it, basically says that, yes, there could be a tremendous need, but you might not be that good at it. Be a tremendous need and you might be really good at it. And if that's the case, then number 3 automatically happens, which is that it would be very difficult to replace you. And so what's important here is that we have step 2, which is your ability to do it. And the reason I say that is because number 1 is, I think, quite a basic statement. So there does need to be a need, but the one factor that you can really control is how good you are at doing something. And if you nail that, then number 3 is going to happen automatically. And so if you make up your mind that you're going to master what you do, then your whole life could change. So the question is, how do you do this? And what I'm going to show you is that to improve your performance, there are really 2 key things on. So the first one is where you are, and the second one is where you're going. And then you've got to get moving in that direction. Now, that probably sounds quite basic. And so if that is so simple and so obvious, then you have to ask yourself, why are so many people stuck? And I'm going to tell you that I think the majority of people are stuck, whether they realize it or not. And what we find is that if we start to ask, well, why are people stuck? Most leadership courses will tell you that it's because there isn't a clear goal. And while that might be part of the answer, I think that part is really quite solvable, because most people, if they get into the right zone, can think about things that they want. And so you can find your goal, and there are methods to setting effective goals. But I think the real answer to that question is actually back down here. And it has to do with where you are. And I'm talking about where we are mentally and our level of conscious awareness of success and leadership principles and what controls your behavior. Now, the reason people get stuck is because of something called paradigms, and that's what we're going to talk all about tonight. Now, paradigms keep us locked into where we are, and they really do make or break us. So the next question would be, what else? Now, I can tell you that paradigms are a multitude of habits and beliefs. You may ask, well, whose habits are they? And interestingly, they're other people's habits. So paradigms are both learned and passed down, and it has a lot to do. And quite often, your relatives look alike in some way. And a paradigm works in a very similar way. And it's also why you prefer certain foods over others. So obviously you can develop tastes and enjoy eating different foods as you get older, but you'll find that even from a very young age, babies will reject certain types of food. And if you really delve into why, it's because they've inherited those preferences. So it really is, in a lot of cases, something that's passed down. And often passed down through many generations. And it's why certain types of foods stay within particular cultural groups for a very long time. And people tend to develop strong preferences to that type of food over others. And so when it comes to your thoughts, you and I are actually the product of somebody else's habitual way of thinking as well. And yes, we can think independently, but I want you to keep in mind the idea that we do inherit and learn a lot of our thought processes as well from the people around us. And so paradigms literally control the life, but you can change that. And so by understanding paradigms, you can really propel your success forward. So in order to do that, let's actually take a moment to explore area 2, which is how your mind works. And I'll also touch on where paradigms fit in. Now, the first thing I want you to keep in mind is that we are programmed to think in pictures. So I'd like you to close your eyes for a moment and think of your car. So really think about the color, the shape of the door handles, the texture of the seats. Can you see it? Just close your eyes and imagine it. Now, what you're doing here is you're capturing an image of your car on what we call the screen of your mind. Now, I want you to quickly think of your front door. Now, think of a loved one that you haven't seen in ages. Now think of a hot air balloon. And now think of a cup of coffee. Okay, if your eyes are still closed, you can open them now. Now, the point of doing that quick exercise was to show you that you're able to switch really quickly from one image to the next. So what I'd like you to now do is pick. Now, what image has come to you? Is it perhaps a brain? If so, then I want to suggest to you that your brain is not your mind any more than your fingernail or your elbow is. Your brain is actually a part of your body. And although it controls your functions, it's more like an electronic switching station, which is still just a part of your body. And so what does the mind look like? So if it's not a brain, then what is it? Now, if you're having a mental blank, don't worry, because that's perfectly normal. The reason you can't see your mind or see an image of it is because it's not a thing at all. The mind is actually an activity. And we're going to delve a little into that. Now, your mind always operates in either a confused or an orderly state, one or the other. And an image, as we saw before with the car or your front door, an image brings order to the mind, but only if you can find one. And so what happens with a lot of personal development work is that thinking about the mind, and when we learn about concepts to do with the mind, it actually puts us in a state of confusion because no one has ever seen the mind. So we don't have an image to relate to. And so when this happens, it stirs up feelings that we'd actually rather not feel. And so we abandon the thought and we move on to something a bit more familiar and a bit more pleasant. Now, one of the biggest breakthroughs in Bob Proctor's work in the personal development field was finding a picture of the mind. Now, Bob Proctor says that this graphic illustration of the mind is without question the most that I have ever found. And he says that in close to 50 years of intensive research into the workings of the mind, this is by far the most valuable thing that he's come across. And so what I'm about to show you is this image that Bob Proctor sort of discovered, but actually was taught by one of his mentors. But he's, I guess, taken it further and articulated it really well and made it more available to the world. And so I'm going to show you what that image is. And it's this little image that you can now see on the screen. And we call this image the stick person. And it might seem a little weird for now, but bear with me, because what we're going to do is we're going to, going forward, refer to the stick person as a representation of the mind. And I'll explain to you why. So in terms of a bit of history about where this image came from, Bob actually started with a mentor called Leland Van Valderwal. And Val shared a story with Bob about Dr. Thurman Fleet, who was from Texas, and in 1934 was quite critical of traditional healing methods, which treated symptoms rather than the cause of the problem. And so he said that basically problems weren't being tackled holistically. And that was because when it came to the mind, there was nothing but confusion. People just didn't know what it was or what it looked like. And so Dr. Fleet proposed that since he'd never seen the mind, he was going to create a picture, so a diagram, which is the one that you see on the screen. And further to that, he said, I'm going to divide this image of the mind into two parts. And those two parts are the top half being the conscious mind and the bottom half being the subconscious mind. And then he said, we'll make the body the instrument of the mind. And so let's take a closer look at each component. So if we start with the conscious mind is what we call the thinking mind, and also the educated mind. The conscious mind is where your intellect resides, and we have the ability to choose the type of life that we want because we have this conscious faculty. By comparison, animals don't have that ability. Therefore, they operate by instinct. Now, with your conscious mind, you can choose to accept or reject everything that comes your way. And you also have the ability to originate ideas in your conscious mind. This operates differently. It's the bottom half, and it's what we call the emotional mind. Now, the subconscious mind can't choose, and as you build ideas in your conscious mind and then you turn them over to the subconscious mind, then the subconscious mind has no choice but to accept them. So it has no ability to reject those ideas. Your subconscious mind is totally deductive. So it can't even differentiate between what's real and what's imagined. So if you use your imagination and you build an image and you impress that image upon your subconscious mind, that idea will begin to move into form or manifest itself. So in theory, that's quite a simple concept. But the issue is that we store a lot of self-limiting information in the subconscious mind, and we don't even know it's there. And that's why self-limiting beliefs hold us back. So let me step you through that process. So let's say that this represents you today. Now, today you're being inundated with all kinds of information. So you have influences coming in like radio, from other people, the television, newspapers. And because you have a reasoning factor, you have the ability to think. Now, we do have the ability to take all of that information that's coming at us, all that negative information about the economy, our environment, and we could simply just challenge it and reject it. But we don't do that. Instead, what we do is we just leave it there and we allow it to seep into our mind, and it flows straight through down to our subconscious mind. So remember how I said the subconscious mind must accept? Well, that's because we're programmed that way. And that's how your paradigm works. So your paradigm actually resides in your subconscious mind. And so what we find is that as these ideas seep in, if we don't challenge them, basically they go straight through to the subconscious mind, and over time they get reinforced, and this is how you build your paradigm. And the thing is, it starts from a very young age. And so to explain that to you, let's look at how we got this way. So if you look over to the right now, this picture represents you as an infant. The thing is, though, that's not how you arrived. So your mind actually needs to develop over a certain number of years. And when you were born, you actually had no conscious faculties. They take years to develop. So usually up to the age of early childhood. So it can be different, but I suppose 4 or 5 is around about the average age where we say that the conscious faculties really start to develop. And if you have children, you can tell what that age is because it's the point at which they start to challenge you and question things. And so when you were an infant, you had no conscious faculties. And so what happened is that you were inundated with these ideas. So the radio, other people, even things that were happening on the news that you may have heard about and they didn't really register, but in fact you did let them sink in. And so you were surrounded by people who were piling information into your young, impressionable mind. And so, in fact, that's how your self-image was formed. So we can see all these ideas just seeping in, forming your paradigm, and then this starts to form your self-image. And so if we look at even things like the language that you learned, and whether or not you learn more than one language, these are all things that you absorb. And that's why we sometimes say that children take things in much more easily and they learn more quickly. It's because they don't have their conscious mind interfering and telling them whether they can or can't do it. But conversely, if a child is hearing very negative thoughts and ideas, then that equally will go straight to their subconscious mind and start to form their paradigm. And so back on the left, this is us again later in life. And what's happening is we're doing exactly the same thing. So instead of thinking for ourselves, in a lot of the case, we actually take in other people's ideas. Except what happens is as you get older, those ideas start to work against you because they reinforce whatever beliefs you collected when you were younger, and you now start to hardwire those thoughts and beliefs. And so your synapses start to harden. And this is why people say things like, that's just the way I am. It's because you've really hardwired those ideas into your mind. And so as an example, if your parents worried about money a lot and you took in those ideas and beliefs, then chances are that you're actually looking for ways to prove that paradigm right and to prove that it's true. And so you probably live your life in a similar way. And so let's take a quick look at all the areas of your life that are controlled by your paradigm. So firstly, we have your logic. So in fact, just thinking about logic is quite an interesting one because I used to think prior to understanding paradigm that you either just were logical or you weren't. But actually, we have a perception of what logic is. And so depending on your paradigm and really how you've been raised and what you've been brought up to believe, what you believe is logical can also vary. So logic isn't a matter of fact, it's actually a matter of perception. And so then we have your productivity and how you utilize your time. Now, we all have the same amount of hours in the day, but some people seem to get much more done. And that's because within their paradigm, they believe that they're more productive people. And so I touched on perception, which is also controlled by your paradigm. And a lot of people go through life not realizing that the way they see things is a result of their past experiences. So simply acknowledging that and therefore being open to different points of view can really open up a lot of doors for you. And then there's your creativity. And some people tend to think I'm either creative or I'm not. But that's not true. You can actually develop your creativity. And again, the more you harness your creativity and develop it, the better at it you get. Now, the real kicker, though, is that your ability to earn money is also controlled by your paradigm. Now, because of my finance background, I do work with a lot of finance professionals. And when I'm in coaching groups with people from a finance background, I'll often ask questions like, who here could see themselves as a future CFO, in the company you're working at in the next 5 to 10 years? And this may or may not surprise you, but in most cases, hardly anybody raises their hand. And that tells me that A, individuals have put a ceiling on their income potential, on their earning potential, and B, that the reason they've done that is because of the self-image that they hold about what they're capable of achieving. And so it's important to understand that your family's paradigm is at the core of your current money blocks, and learning to change that will have a profound impact on your results. So what I'm suggesting to you here is that to increase your income, if that's one of your goals, you need to see yourself as someone capable and worthy of earning that amount of money. And if you don't, you're always going to find ways to sabotage your success. Now, the simplest way I can example is to look at an airplane. And so all commercial planes have an inbuilt automatic pilot. And, you know, we have the saying, something's on autopilot, and we can frequently relate this to planes. And this is what we call a cybernetic instrument. And what cybernetic means is that basically it's a computer system. So in the case of a plane, a flight pattern is programmed into the plane's control system. And it's a computer system whereby if the plane goes off course, the system kicks in and measures the deviation from the set goal and corrects the flight pattern to bring it back on course. And so as an example, here's a plane leaving Chicago for Paris. And what you'll see is that the plane actually gets hit by some unexpected turbulence, and all of a sudden it's off course and it's no longer going to Paris. But what happens is the automatic pilot detects that deviation from the original flight pattern, the cybernetic system gets activated, and the autopilot puts the plane back on course. Now, interestingly, I read a stat that a rocket going to the moon is off course 90% of the time. So that means 90% of the time, the cybernetic system is correcting errors in the flight path to bring the rocket back on course. Now, this sounds pretty easy to understand in relation to planes and rockets, but what does it mean for you? And so I'm going to suggest to you that this cybernetic mechanism actually works the same way with you and your results. And so we're going to look at that in a minute, but essentially what we're saying is that if you have a paradigm, and you do have a paradigm, but if you have a certain belief within that paradigm and you start to outperform and outdo yourself, in many cases, your paradigm is going to pull you back on course and bring you back down to where you started. And we often see that as an example with things like weight loss, where people start off on the right track, they start to lose weight, but before you know it, some crisis happens and, you know, they may be back to bad, unhealthy eating habits again, and they find a way to put that weight back on. And so that's just a function of how the paradigm operates. And once you understand that, you can start to change the outcomes for yourself. So how do you change your paradigm? Well, someone by the name of Buckminster Fuller said that you never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, you have to build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. And so if you are struggling at trying to change things, I want to point out to you that until you address your self-limiting beliefs within your paradigm, your results are highly unlikely to change. Now, you may see temporary improvements, as I mentioned before, but in most cases, self-sabotage kicks in and you'll find yourself going right back to where you started, or maybe even further behind. Now, Leland Val Vander Waal, who we mentioned before, who mentored Bob Proctor, said that doing it at once will increase the possibility of success. And so there are changes that you can apply immediately to improve your results. So let's now take a look at how you can achieve long-lasting results. Now, earlier in this webinar, I mentioned that to achieve long-lasting success, you need to know where you are and where you're going. And we said that you've got to get moving in that direction by executing your strategy. But if you have been feeling stuck and frustrated, then chances are that what you've been doing is spending all your time focusing on your goals and where you're going and trying to execute that strategy. Now, obviously that does need to happen. But the problem here is that if you don't understand where you are in terms of your paradigm and your self-limiting beliefs, then your starting point for executing your strategy is completely wrong, because you don't know what the right path would be to go from A to B if you don't know what A is. Now, someone told me recently that in the famous animation series, The Simpsons, it's set in Springfield because there's a Springfield in every state of America. So you don't really know what state it's set in. And so using that example, if you mapped out the perfect plan to drive from Springfield, Massachusetts to Springfield, New York, but in fact you weren't aware you were starting from Springfield, New Jersey, then following your plan wouldn't get you to New York at all. And so this is the same as not understanding where you are in relation to your paradigm. So even if you use the law of attraction to visualize New York and you read out affirmations about being in New York, your plan still wouldn't get you there. Now, this might seem like a trivial example, but in my experience, this is where most people go wrong. And in fact, it's where I went wrong for years. So if you take nothing else from this webinar tonight, I want you to understand that until you address your self-limiting beliefs, your results are never going to improve permanently. And that inner doubt and fear is always going to be there. So the big question is, how can you break the cycle? So to improve your paradigm, I'm going to show you two different things that you can do. Now, the first is that you can develop and use what we call your intellectual factors. And the second is that you can use the emotional freedom technique. And so let's start with your intellectual factors. Now, as we've seen today, we're programmed to live from the outside in. We take in what goes on around us, and it then filters down to our paradigm. And we saw that earlier. But you may not realize that you also have these 5 sensory factors. You obviously would have heard about these in school, but I'm going to explain to you how they affect your behavior. So with these sensory factors, you can see, hear, smell, taste, and touch. And they're like little antennae plugged into the conscious mind. Now, we use our senses to react to most situations, and this is a direct reflection of our programming. So this is where your current logic and your perception kick in to form judgments and you react. So that's why some people react and they're completely calm because their paradigm has told them this situation's fine and I can be calm, whereas someone else will react to the exact same situation with anger and completely blow up at people. Now, this reaction, though, can be contained because you've actually been gifted with higher mental faculties, which we call your intellectual faculties. And they're planted in our mind at birth. But the trick is to know that they're there and to learn how to use them. So let's look at what they are. So you have these 5 intellectual faculties. Now, the first one is perception, and that's how you view everything. And it's also how others view everything. So a recent example that I overheard some people talking about is that I heard someone raving about the fact that they had saved $61 on a flight to get from Sydney to London. And so they were really happy that someone else had paid more flight. But when we delved down into how they were getting there, they were willing to fly 20 hours extra and I think taking 3 additional stops to save that $61. So who is right and who did the most sensible thing in that situation really depends on your perception and whether you value the money over the time. So then we have the will, and will is what gives you the ability to concentrate and to focus. And if you want to work on your will and improve your ability to focus, then one thing you can do is light a candle so that you can see the flame flickering and just focus on the flame for as long as you can. And if you do this over time, you'll find that it improves your focus and concentration because initially we're sort of trained to drift away, but the more that you do this, you'll find that it allows you to zone in and focus on a task at hand. So you can give that a go and test it. Now, you also have imagination. And Napoleon Hill said that imagination is the most marvelous and miraculous, inconceivable, powerful force that the world has ever known. Now, imagination creates fantasies, and fantasy is that first stage of creation in life, as it is with your goals. But what we need to learn to do is progress that fantasy to theory and then turn it into fact. Now, you also have your memory. And there's actually no such thing as a bad memory, just weak or strong memories, because you can train your memory. And there are people, you know, teaching other people how to memorize all sorts. I've learned to memorize lyrics to hundreds of songs, and it's just something I can do quite easily. So I constantly put my memory to work. And interestingly, sometimes when you're trying to push yourself to learn something, that's when it can be the hardest. And so with a trained memory, I've found that the reinforcing actually sinks in when I'm asleep or taking a break from learning the lyrics. And so I know from experience that you can train your memory. It really is a use it or lose it tool. So then let's look at reason. And reason is what gives us the ability to think and where we originate individual thoughts and then bring them together in the formation of ideas. And we can also observe our ideas and improve on them. So finally, we have intuition, and that's that beautiful tool inside with the gift to read vibration. And your intuition permits you to know and to know that you know what's happening around you, if you can get your head around that. Now, people confuse this as being a sixth sense, but it's actually a faculty that you can develop and work on. And there are people who specifically train in different ways of tapping into your intuition. And so the significance of this is that it's through the use of these intellectual faculties that we get rid of the self-limiting paradigm. And we have the ability to challenge what comes in rather than reacting with our senses. So when I showed the picture before of all of those ideas seeping straight into your paradigm, it's with your intellectual factors that you would challenge those ideas. And so I want you to remember from now on that if an external source suggests something to you like it's hard to make money or you're unworthy of success, then I really want you to challenge that. And if that is part of your paradigm currently, then I want you to do some digging and find out where you got that idea and then reject it and build a new self-image around it. So you're now armed with two key pieces of information that you can put to use. Firstly, you know that you have a paradigm that influences your results, and how hopefully you now understand how the paradigm works. But now with the intellectual factors, you also know how to interrupt that pattern by using these creative factors. Now, this process is very effective, but it's going to require some practice and reinforcement of the awareness that you have these intellectual factors, and then it's going to take repetition. And I'll show you just quickly why repetition is necessary when changing paradigms. And basically what we have here is a white line that represents the sound of your MP3 player. So let's imagine that you were listening to something, so some personal development material. And the red line represents you actually listening to your MP3 player. And what happens is that as you're listening, other ideas come into your head and you go on this thought trip. And so your real listening gets interrupted. And so we'd almost say that these things are operating at two different frequencies. So you have a thought frequency, but you've also got the frequency of your MP3 player actually playing an audio to you. And so what happens is the white line keeps going on, but you're not listening to what's being said because you have other ideas popping into your head at various intervals. And so as a result, you're not really taking in the message because your mind is wandering. But over time, with the repetition, what happens is that you're listening to this message and actually your pattern gets interrupted or you get distracted at a different spot. So over time, with that repetition, you'll find that you do get that continuity because you'll fill in the missing pieces by listening to the same thing over and over again. And so this is why I encourage you to practice things and build in the repetition because it does take time to sink in. So unlike the school method where we were basically taught you study a subject, you do an exam, and then you move on, it's actually not the way your mind learns at all. So keep that idea of repetition in mind. Now, the second method that I touched on is what I call emotional freedom technique, or EFT for short, and it's also known as tapping. Now, if you are one of my blog subscribers, you'll see that I put a lot of posts out about tapping for various purposes. And so you may already be familiar with tapping, but let me just tell you what it is for those who aren't familiar. So tapping, or EFT, is a mind-body tool that involves gently tapping on various acupressure points with your fingers. And the effect of that tapping is that it deactivates your fight or flight response to certain triggers. And you hear common examples of fight or flight around phobias to things like spiders or even clowns. My sister's scared of clowns, so yeah, it's just something that's always freaked her out. And so you can actually measure people's level of anxiety changing when, you know, they're presented with even an image of a spider or a clown. And so that response gets triggered based on a fear. But the less obvious triggers are around things like your relationship with money and the way you feel about different forms of money. So you still have that reaction, but you don't necessarily realize that it's to do with your fight or flight response. And so I'm going to give you a quick example of that. And to do that, what I want you to imagine is that you've got an income goal for the year, and that income goal is $2 million. Now, wouldn't that be fantastic? So think about $2 million. How does that feel for you? Now, if you start to think about it, I'm guessing that for most of you, there would be a conflict of feelings. So initially, you might feel excited about $2 million, thinking about what that could do for you and how awesome it would feel to earn that much money. But then a sense of dread kicks in. And because you don't know how you're going to do it, and you find yourself worrying about that, you suddenly start to think, well, no, that's impossible. You know, if I earn X amount of money today, there's no way that I could earn $2 million. And so suddenly you'll find that this will trigger certain emotions in you, like sadness or embarrassment, or even a feeling of sickness for some people. And that is what a fight or flight response is. And so what I love about tapping is that we use it to tackle issues head on. So we use tested diagnostic methods to identify your hidden blocks. And basically what we do is we acknowledge that you have negative emotions that you're holding on to, and we honor the past for what it is. Now, interestingly, most personal development strategies tell you to only focus on what you want and never think about the negative or what you don't want. But I can tell you from my own experience that consciously ignoring the negativity doesn't mean that it's not there subconsciously. So my view is that until you address it, it will continue to return to you the same self-limiting results over and over again, because it's still there and it's playing like a record in your mind over and over again. And unless you know how to stop it, it's going to continue to sabotage your results. So what tapping will do is it will actually neutralize those strong negative emotions that trigger the stress response in you today. And so once that negativity is neutralized, you can then use tapping to move into a more productive and empowered state without the baggage that's behind it. And the best part is it actually happens really quickly. Now, unfortunately, we don't have any time to do any tapping on this webinar because we're actually out of time. So I'm going to wrap this up fairly quickly. But my gift to you at the end of this presentation is that I'm going to give you a link to a tapping video that you can follow to ease any negative emotions that you're currently experiencing. And I'll actually send that link out with the replay, which if you're registered, then you will receive that as my gift to you. Now, I did promise to discuss the law of attraction and why it is that setting goals based on abundance doesn't work. So the reason that it doesn't work is because words like abundance and prosperity are feel-good words. And we tend to not have any specific resistance to those concepts because they're quite nice and everyone wants to feel more abundant. Now, you might be thinking that you're very open to receiving wealth if you have a monetary goal. Yet for many people, they just can't seem to make that next $1,000 let alone the $1 million that you have on your vision board. So the problem is that words like abundance are non-specific to your money issues, because conquering your money issues involves dealing with very specific things like savings and income and debt. So if the thought of debt that you have, or lack of savings, or failed attempts at earning more money makes you feel sick, then you absolutely do have money blocks. And until you clear them, you're going to continue repeating this cycle. And so, as I mentioned earlier, one of my mentors, Bob Proctor, who was in The Secret actually was, Bob Proctor was the first to say that there was something missing. And The Secret was all about the law of attraction. But I'm going to show you what it is that was missing in The Secret. So when it comes to the conscious mind, which, as we said, is where we develop all of our wants because we have this intellect, we have to bear in mind that the subconscious mind is where we hold our paradigm, which we've looked at already. Now, what I mentioned earlier is that your body is actually an instrument for the paradigm, and it's your body that takes the action to execute on the goals that you have. Now, the thing is, the law of attraction responds to the paradigm. It doesn't respond directly to your want. So the gap with The Secret is that it left you thinking that if you just focus on your goals and what you want, it's going to come to you. But the law of attraction is busy responding to your paradigm, which is in your subconscious mind, not your conscious mind, where you come up with those goals. And so in order to truly achieve your goals, you need to fully align your conscious mind and your subconscious mind. And so if you've been using the law of attraction unsuccessfully, what I want to point out is that it, in fact, has been working. And what it's been doing is responding to your self-limiting beliefs, because that's what's in your paradigm. And so you're essentially telling it to do that. And so your paradigm will overshadow your goals and your wants every time. But the good news for you is that once we're able to clear your money blocks or whatever self-limiting beliefs you have, you'll then be able to direct your energy and your efforts into implementing strategies to achieve your goals without that underlying fear that you'll continue to sabotage your own results. And at that point, your paradigm will be aligned to your goals and you'll move forward to achieve long-lasting results. So to get you there as quickly as possible, I'm going to run through the final part of the webinar, which is how I can support you. Now, the good news is that you can apply the strategies and tips that I've shared with you tonight right away to generate better results. However, I know that some of you are looking to achieve massive results more quickly, and with the right level of guidance, you can do this in a much shorter time frame compared to figuring it all out on your own. So at the moment, I'm actually looking for a few more of my dream clients, and I've opened up a few more spots for a limited time, and I would like to work with you on a breakthrough strategy session, which I will offer as a gift to you if you meet the criteria below. Now, the clients that I work with have to be coachable, motivated, and willing to leave no stone unturned in finding out what's been holding them back. Now, as I said earlier, I can provide you with the step-by-step guidance on how to reach your highest potential and achieve your goals, but ultimately it'll be up to you to put in the work and take ownership of your results. And that requires a firm commitment. So who is this for exactly? Well, really, it's for corporate professionals because that's who I mostly work with given my background. I also work with business owners and entrepreneurs. I work with versatile and multi-talented people who need help focusing on what to do next because you might have quite varying interests, as I do. And that takes a fair degree of self-control as well to know what to work on in what order. And finally, I'm keen to work with anyone who feels stuck, both financially and emotionally. And especially those of you who have been through other programs before and haven't achieved the results you wanted. I know that if you're committed, I can absolutely help you because the EFT work alone will give you clarity about what's been holding you back. And once you clear those blocks, you will breeze through the coaching modules that I offer in my program. So if that does sound like you and you'd like to make a massive change in your life, then here's how we can move forward together. So basically, what I want to offer to you is a free breakthrough clarity and strategy session. And the way that the process works is we would do a call on Skype where basically we would be focused on identifying exactly where you are right now, both in terms of your career goals, your monetary goals, and also your current setbacks and your paradigm. And so then we'll work on identifying exactly what your ambitions are in terms of career and personal goals. And then we will discuss strategies to move you forward to reach those goals. And so normally these coaching strategy sessions take around 45 minutes to an hour, and you will be speaking with me personally about your career or your business roadmap. And so, as I mentioned, this is really for corporate professionals and entrepreneurs and people wanting to be leaders and looking to significantly improve their results. And this is for people who have a strong work ethic and truly believe that they have what it takes to secure their dream job or to start a business. And mostly it's for people who have a commitment to excellence and will do the work required. And so, as I already mentioned, I can guide you on the path to professional and personal fulfillment, but you'll need to put in the work. And so I only work with people who are already in the habit of taking ownership of their results. So on the flip side, who is this not for? Well, basically, it's not for people who make excuses or complain. It's not for people who are stuck in information gathering mode and just want to study materials for interest's sake. Because I know and I found that people who are not prepared to take action are not going to get any results. And interestingly, it's also not for people who are perfectly happy with their life just as it is. Because although my program can still really benefit you, if there's nothing that you want to improve, you won't have the drive to follow through on what's required. So if there's nothing that you want to change, then this probably isn't suited to your circumstances right now. Now, I do these calls because knowing that we're a good fit is really crucial to me, because I like to get results for all of my clients and I like to work with them for the long term. And to do that, I need to help them realize quick improvements. So the truth is that there are some people that I can't help. And if that's the case, then I'll be 100% upfront with you on the call, and I'll suggest someone else to you if I can think of the right person or an alternative. And so I really am looking for those people who are a good fit and that I'm certain I can get results for quickly. And so the first step would be for you to complete an application for a private strategy session. And this application is necessary to determine, firstly, that I can help you actually generate those results. And secondly, that you're prepared to step up and commit and take action and do the work that's required. So as you'll see on screen, there's a button that's just popping up now for you to apply for that clarity and strategy session. Now, once I receive your application, you'll be able to schedule a time with me to conduct your strategy session. And this is where we'll really start working together to figure out what you want and how to make it happen in the fastest time possible and with predictability. And then at the end of the call, one of two things will happen. Firstly, you'll either be a good fit and I will extend an invitation for you to work with me as one of my clients. Or if it's not a good fit, then that's okay too, and there'll be no hard feelings or obligations. It's really to determine whether or not we're a good fit for each other. Now, either way, you'll receive an insanely valuable strategy session and you'll walk away with newfound clarity as to where you are right now and what's holding you back from achieving the results that you want. So it will likely be the most valuable 45 minutes that you invest in your career, professional, or business development this year. So go ahead and press the button on the right now and complete your application, and we'll see if we're a good fit for working together. Now, I will say that I currently am reviewing a high volume of applications that have come in the last 30 days. And so this opportunity is extremely limited because of the intense one-on-one time that's needed to provide you with results. And so, as I mentioned before, I only work with clients who I know with certainty and conviction will be able to partner with me to generate those results. And so I really only have a few spots available. But if you do get your application in the next day or so, I do promise that I'll review it, and you will definitely get on a strategy call with me for us to determine whether you are a good fit. So if you do feel like this is the right thing for you and you would like to go ahead and book in your complimentary strategy call with me to discuss your personal circumstances, then go ahead and do that by clicking on the link at the side of the webinar. So just hit the Apply Now button and it will take you straight to the application page. And so if you qualify, then you'll be able to go ahead and follow the future instructions to set up a time to have your appointment with me. So go ahead and click that button now to apply for your strategy session. So look, that brings us to the end of the webinar, and I want to sincerely thank you for attending this webinar tonight. And I want you to dream bold dreams and then live them. And don't think for a second of why you can't do this and achieve your goals. I only want you to think of how you can and know that there is a way forward. And then make up your mind that you are ready to make a change and invest in yourself. Now, if now isn't the right time for you, then I totally respect that, and I do wish you all the very best on your journey. And I hope that we do cross paths again in the future. And of course, if you are on my subscriber list, then I will keep putting out blog posts and giving you lots of valuable information. Now, if you have made the decision to book in a strategy session and you're ready to change your life, then I do look forward to receiving your application and speaking with you very soon for your personalized strategy session. So once again, thank you. I'm Caroline Labor, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your week, and I look forward to speaking to you very soon. So thank you and have a wonderful night.